And now it is time to introduce Lysa Allman-Baldwin. I'm so excited that she's here to give us her talk today.
Good morning, Unity San Francisco. It is so good to be with you here this morning. Now, when Reverend Ken and I looked at our calendars months and months ago, we had no idea that we wouldn't be doing this in person and that we'd be doing it virtually. But life happens and we have to pivot. And so here we are, we have all this great technology, which still allows us to be together in sacred spiritual community across the miles. So the title of my talk is, That's My Story, and I'm Willing to Give It Up. Now, we all have a story, that collection of experiences we've had in our lives. Some of them are positive, some leave a lot to be desired. But what often happens is we latch onto the challenging ones, making them the central narrative through which we filter current and future events. So I have two stories from my life to share with you. This is me at about 6 months old. And as you can see, I had big brown eyes and slicked down jet black hair, and I was smiling all of the time. And it just seemed like I was so excited just to be here. My mother used to tell me stories about taking me out in the stroller and double strapping me in because she was afraid I was going to fall out because I was always jumping up and down and waving and trying to say hi to everybody. And when I look at this picture, it seems like I had this vibrant light oozing from every pore of my body. And I'm sure that I thought that life, whatever it was exciting and new. I was fed and I was clothed and I was bathed and I was held, and people oohed and awed all over me. And life was simply wonderful. But as I was growing up, things started to change. The external messages I was getting from those around me weren't quite as rosy, and just being myself became a challenge. Suddenly, other people had a lot to say. Now, whether you're a boy or a girl or however you identify yourself, some of these might sound familiar to you. You're not smart enough, or you're too smart for your own good. Your race or your sexual orientation is wrong. You're not Black, gay, straight, Hispanic, whatever, enough. You're too tall or you're too short. You're too fat or you're too thin. You're too young or you're too old. Your beliefs are wrong or your faith is wrong. You really should drive this car. You need to wear these clothes. You don't belong in this neighborhood. Or you've forgotten where you came from if you live in a certain place in a certain manner. And this list goes on and on and on. And these supposed guidelines for living can be heavy burdens to bear. So the second story I have for you is that I like to ride my bike to the gym, especially in the spring and summer months. It's a great way to get exercise. I can leave my car at home. The gym is only about 2 miles from my house, and I always go the same way just out of habit. But I have been thinking for a while about changing it up a bit, just to see some new scenery, do something different. So on Tuesday, July 18th, 2017, I left my house. I went up to the first corner, and that's where I always turn right. And when I got to the corner, I decided, you know what? Let's make today the day. Let's go straight. So I crossed the street, was riding downhill, not particularly fast, totally aware of my surroundings. And I looked up ahead and saw what looked like rocks and gravel strewn across the sidewalk. And I realize now that in trying to avoid the rocks and gravel, I overcorrected by squeezing both brakes. The bike screeched to a halt. The back wheel reared up, and all I heard myself say was, and then just like in the movies, like when someone's trying to show an out-of-body experience or maybe a flashback, everything went white. When the white disappeared and life came back into focus, I found myself on the ground on all fours with most of my weight on one arm. And due to the intense pain, it took me about 10 seconds to realize I had probably broken that arm. To this day, I don't remember anything that happened in between the white. The only evidence I have that I had obviously gone over the handlebars and rolled was that my bike and my backpack were up on the sidewalk in front of me. I had road rash all over my body. And when I looked back on my helmet later, there were scratches where my head had obviously hit the ground. Fortunately, I was able to reach my backpack with my other arm, pull out my phone, and call a friend of mine who lived about 2 blocks away to come and help me. So after I hung up from her, laying on the ground in intense pain, the first thing that came to my mind was, Lysa, say your gratitude list. So I just started talking out loud, everything that I could think of. I'm on the sidewalk and not in the street. It's daytime and not nighttime. It's a sunny day and not raining. I'm only 2 miles from the hospital. I have health insurance. My friend who's coming to get me, she'll know exactly what to do. And the biggest thing on that gratitude list for me was, God is here. A man jogging by, my friend that I had called, and some people driving down the street who saw me on the sidewalk, all stopped right around the same time and called 911. So once I got to the hospital, got to the emergency room, I got the distressing news that I had actually broken my elbow and I had to have surgery right away. So as you might imagine, once I got home that night, all drugged up, my arm wrapped from my shoulder to the wrist, most of the abilities that I had before and now realize I took for granted have been taken away, even if only temporarily. And that gratitude list I was so easily able to say before, is nowhere to be found. Cooking, driving, brushing my hair, opening the toothpaste, tying my shoes, changing my clothes, everything was a challenge. Being grateful for what I could do had gotten lost in the shuffle. In the early days of my recovery, I realized what I was really suffering from was an overwhelming feeling of worthlessness. And what I was telling myself about those breaks in my arm was, see, you can't do anything right. Why did you have to go a different way to the gym? The other way was working just fine. You always make bad decisions. These problems you're having, they're all your fault. You're no good to anybody like this. Once again, I was tying my self-worth to my old childhood stories, what other people had to say about me. But like I said, we all have a story, that collection of experiences we've had in our lives. But in latching onto the challenging ones, we allow our ego, our inner critic, sit on our shoulder and whisper them to us over and over and over. In the book Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping, he talks about something that he calls a forgiveness centrifuge. And he explains that forgiveness centrifuge kind of like having a juicer where you put something in, spin it around, and separate the two parts. And he says we can use that forgiveness centrifuge to separate the facts of what happened in our lives from our interpretation of the facts. So for example, your fact may have been that as a child, your father left the family. Your interpretation of that fact might have been that it was because of you, that you were bad or wrong or did something you shouldn't have done or didn't do something you should have done, and you took his leaving to mean that it was about you. Your fact may have been that you had a certain career goal that maybe other people said was beneath you, or that boys or girls can't or shouldn't do or be that. Your interpretation of that fact might have been, well, my ideas are stupid. Or I really need to ask other people's opinions because I can't be trusted to make one on my own. You may have even thought, well, who am I to have a dream in the first place? And those stories that we tell ourselves come out in the same way what people might think might be a positive situation. So for example, I have a friend who says she had a fabulous childhood. She said it was wonderful. People told her how smart she was and how resourceful she was. She ate all her vegetables. She played well with others. She said she got nothing but positive input. Those were her facts. Her interpretation of the facts was, because of all those accolades, she had no room for error. If she messed up, people would see that she really didn't have it all together and that she was a failure. But once we can see the difference between the facts of what happened in our lives and our interpretation of the facts, we can make conscious choices guided by our higher selves about whether or not those stories are serving us any longer. Now, looking at our old stories is not about spiritual bypassing or what some people might call denial or looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. Rather, knowing that we have the power to reframe our old stories. So, I have 5 steps to help you do just that. To look at our stories, determine what is error thinking, and for the ones that are not, to see how to reframe them to chart a new conscious path for the future. So here we go. Step number 1, stop and take a deep breath. When you do that, you stand or sit a little bit taller or straighter. Your shoulders open up a little bit. It allows even just a little bit of space for perhaps something else to come in. Step number 2, thank the old story for getting your attention. Whatever it is, it's trying to tell you something. Step number 3, examine that old story. Is that story you're telling yourself absolutely true? How is it true? Why is it true? Do the people who love and support you the most, do they believe that story too? Step number 4, reframe that old story. You can ask yourself things like, what is the opposite of this old story? Or how do I want to feel without the burden of this story? Or what if I choose not to believe this old story this time? And step number 5, be gentle with yourself. You're changing negative patterns of thought that have been deeply rooted in your subconscious mind, sometimes for years. Beating yourself up for still having that old story is like going to the gym one time and thinking, ta-da, my body's going to look exactly the way I want it to. But it doesn't work that way. It takes practice. We're just putting one story in that forgiveness centrifuge at a time, spinning it around and separating the facts from our interpretation of the facts. If you practice these 5 steps on a regular basis, I guarantee you will experience amazing results. So this is my new arm. I call it my new bionic arm. And you can see where I had all of the breaks and they put pins in to stabilize the bones and then a plate holding it all together. So what I say to myself now about those cracks in my arms, those old stories, is this: I am adventuresome and like to try new things. I am capable and smart. My vulnerability is one of my strengths. I am grateful for the blessings and the lessons in this experience. People love me for who I am, not what I can do. And at that plate holding it all together, I am worthy and I love myself just the way I am. And to that cute little girl, I say, You were born a perfect expression of God. You always have been, and you always will be. Those other things were your old story, but it's time to give them up. You just need to believe in yourself because you are far more than you know. So I've written an affirmation for us today. I'll say it once, and then wherever you are, let's all say it together. I have the power to reframe my old stories and chart a new conscious path for the future. Let's say that together. I have the power to reframe my old stories and chart a new conscious path for the future. Unity San Francisco, I'm so honored to be with you here this morning. Thank you for welcoming me into your homes. I hope to see you in person sometime soon, and namaste.